You are an awesome audience, and thank you very much for the help. I love it. So we have a fantastic panel for you today. I know a lot of this audience ranges from students to people who have been at their jobs for 5 years, 10 years. And in fact, I'm really happy to see a lot of people come up to me and say, hey, I'm really doing this, but I'd love to do my startup. And for you today in the panel, we have a spectacular lineup of people who have been at big companies, of people who have run their own startups, who are running their own startups, who are driving innovation at big and small companies. So we're going to give you a good perspective of that. Let me get on stage the panel members. First, I'd like to invite Joe Fernandez. Joe Fernandez is the founder and CEO of Mukti Lifestyle Solutions. He's been ex-McKinsey, been there a long time, done that. Then has ventured into startups. He has incubated a bunch of different startups, a couple of his own, and he's about to launch a new product right next week. So, over the time that we had backstage, he was actually approving some UI designs, changing some logos, and most importantly, he's a rock star. Like literally, next Saturday, he has his own rock concert. He deals with fusion, so we'll learn more about that. Welcome, Joe.
Thanks, Rahul. Thank you.
I'd like to also welcome on stage Mani Doraiswamy. Mani is the co-founder and CTO of Orangescape. No stranger to you. You saw him in action in the morning. Right in 2003, Mani has started this company which has taken it to new heights. A company in India, a product company, building great products, admired all over the world. They even presented at Google I/O. Really respected for their UX sense, for their products, for their consumerization of IT. Things that in India, we typically are not known for, but they've really cracked a lot of those here. I'd like to also welcome Rajan. Rajan is from Intuit. Welcome, Rajan, to the panel. Rajan manages innovation at Intuit. So Intuit has a very similar culture to Google of the percentage time for innovation. So Intuit has a 10% time allocated, and he heads up the innovation part in Bangalore. Intuit has a great center here, and they've tried a lot of interesting things for SMBs in India. And it's really fascinating to hear some of these stories like Fussell and Farmers. So we'll hear more about how innovation can be driven in large companies as well as startups. And last but not the least, I'd like to welcome Ravi Gururaj. Ravi has been in this field for the past 20 years. How many of you know of Trilogy? Trilogy was one of the first companies in India that really had superstars in them. Ravi headed up that unit in India. He was the managing director here. He then went on to found his own startup, VM Logics, that actually got acquired by Citrix. So today he's a VP of product development at Citrix. So welcome, a very welcome, warm welcome to all of you here. Thank you very much for coming.
Thanks, Rahul.
So what we'd like to do today is understand from your perspective, how do things work, whether in a big company, in a small company, and in a small company, in a startup. So let's start with the big company scenarios, and let's slowly move on to getting down to a startup level, okay? All right, so big company, US-centric company, India-centric company. How do you see a US-owned company? So headquarters in California, a unit here, an office in India. Ravi, in your experience, how do you see the exchange happening? What is the culture in such a company? Is it more of a top-down thing? California dictates what Bangalore does, or is it a joint ownership model? How do you see that?
Well, to be, truth in advertising, I've just joined a big company a couple of years ago, right? It's Citrix. But, I think it's very company-specific, the culture that you might have in a certain company. And it's also maturity-specific. How long has the company been in India? What have they been doing in terms of the mandate they've been given, and how successful have they been in the period they've been in India, right? Those things define what you would see at a specific company. But I think the ideal scenario and where we're at Citrix is we really look at the world as flat, right? Talent flows wherever it is, right? And we look at development across all our products as a global venture. We have teams, my team itself, for instance, I have a team in Bangalore, I have a team in Hyderabad, we bought Cloud.com, half of that team reports into my group. I have a team in Santa Clara, we build our products across all of those geos, right?
So who makes decisions? Who drives
Yeah,
decisions?
so the
here?
decision is made by the product owner, the product
Okay.
manager.
Wherever they are.
But fundamentally, the decision is made by the market and the customer, right? Ideally.
Yeah.
So, there's obviously a gatekeeper for what happens.
Yeah.
There's a set of people who prioritize
Yeah.
what you will do
Yeah.
first and what you will hold off for later.
Makes sense.
And that, is partly kind of, the product manager and the management team,
Right,
which
right,
is
right.
me and others, right? That
Makes
will
sense.
drive that.
That brings me to an interesting point. Rajan, at Intuit, you would imagine Intuit is a global product. Now, with engineers in Bangalore, you have the whole Indian SMB market up front. So do you choose to work on products that are global in nature, or would you work on India-specific projects? How do you balance that? Is it 70-30 or 30-70?
Well, I'd like to pick on what Ravi said about culture. I think every company has its own culture. I'd also like to add another point, which is I think these culture also get defined by which markets you are present in. If you are a company which is primarily US focused and you're developing products for that, you might see this instance of US telling what India to do. But when you have presence across the globe and you're also trying to do experiments in India, there is a lot of co-ownership in terms of how the decisions get made. On the aspect of what is the split, I think it depends on the strategy of how much you want to play on which market for what duration. And for now, I think in India we've just set our foot and we've run experiments for the last 3 or 4 years. We have a fairly nimble, two piece of fed kind of teams which are doing experiments in India and a couple of experiments going on.
Okay, cool. Mani and Joe, so you come from a small company, startup mindset.
Sure.
So do you see, Mani, do you see the need for a US office? Like, do you have a US office?
Yeah, we do.
You do? Okay. When was that established and why was it established? Couldn't you have run it from India completely? And what is the role of the US office today?
Yeah, I think largely if you're a small company, you are asking me a business question, but as a technologist, you get formulas, right? So the formula I would like to tell you is that transaction cost is equal to 0. What do I mean by that? If you look at any manufacturing company or any automotive company, you have supply chain and you have distribution chain. All of them involves cost. Right? You have to bring raw materials to the factory, or once you have a finished product, you have to sell it through your distribution chain. All of them has cost, transaction cost. But only in software industry, it's all bits and bytes, so transaction cost is 0. So what that means is it really doesn't matter where you are because you're literally going to get software, whether it's from US or in terms of distribution. Today, brand ambassador is internet, right? So you don't need Shah Rukh Khans to advertise. Right. All you need is a good product to go to the market.
So then the US office is more sales, or do you have engineering there as well?
Right. So what I meant was the manufacturing setup, or in our case, the engineering setup can be anywhere. And India is a great source for both developers as well as for great talent, right? But there are certain things that you can't take away, especially the relationship part of it. So the ecosystem that's revolving around in US, especially the ones that you use to reach to your customer, the news channels, the marketing, and the sales, you have to have somebody sit there. So I would say if you are a startup, go have your team in India, have a nimble team, go to the market and reach it through internet. Once you reach a certain size, then you probably need an office in US to take care of the marketing front.
Joe, you've had a similar experience, or you're just starting out on a bunch of startups?
No, I think it's all to do with influence, right? Yeah. And I think in all these scenarios, credible influence is key, right? So, and credible influence, for example, in large companies, when I was at McKinsey and even Everest, when we set up our office here, we transplanted people who had credibility in the US, but then we brought them locally here so that they could work locally on the ground, but they had credibility with the team wherever decisions were being made. They had credibility with them in terms of being able to take and offload some of those decisions into the local markets, right? Okay. And similarly for the startup I'm currently building, like I think Mani said, sometimes marketing, etc., you don't need to have credible physical influence. So wherever that's not required, you don't need to go there, right? But for my current product, for certain partners, we need to manage those partners. And we have to therefore be there locally. They need to see us, right? One of the things that I've seen as part of being part of the Angel Network group is investors want the founders to be close by, right? They want to touch and feel the founders close by. So those kinds of decisions require you to then be present in those markets depending on what you're trying to access there, right? Sometimes the customers, if you're in a digital business, they don't know where you're actually providing that service from. But partners or your investors might need you to have a local presence.
Okay, got it. Rajan, let me start with you on a question on innovation. Could you give me an example of an innovative product that's inspired by India or is done differently for India? Something that you couldn't have thought of launching elsewhere in the world, but it means so much that if you do it right in India, you may be able to scale it. Any example of a product or any anecdote there?
Are you referring to products from Intuit or in general?
From Intuit that you have experienced that you can share.
Well, one of the examples that I can talk about is this Fasal. Fasal is a service that Intuit has, which is like a marketplace for giving out price information to farmers. Now, this is very unique problem for our country, and Fasal gives this information to farmers through mobile, through messages, and also through missed call. I don't think it could have been done anywhere else because the problem is very specific to India, and also the kind of technology in terms of its accessibility that needed to be designed using SMS and missed call. I think example that I could think of.
Great. Mani, did you at any point need to customize anything for India, or was anything at any point designed for India and your products, or your market was always the US?
There were Indian customers, but mostly we designed it for global customers. So it wasn't done anything.
So nothing needed to be specifically localized for India?
No, actually, businesses operate pretty much the same way, right? Unless you are Bharat Matrimony, right? So, which has a very specific niche. I don't know whether Bharat Matrimony would be a good idea if you run it in US and people are willing to pay any amount of money. That's a very successful, if you think about it as a people are trying to figure out how to monetize consumer software. Bharatmoni is an excellent example. So that might be a good use case. But for business, I don't think there are too many variations between consumers. And
Ravi, in your Trilogy experience or VM Logic experience, did you happen to ever tweak a product for India, or do you think done globally is good enough, it applies to India?
All the companies I've worked for are thinking big. They're thinking huge markets, right? And they're thinking, where the addressable space is large, right? So when you start to do that, you can't really think India in at least the places I've been at the last few years. So at Trilogy, we were targeting the global market. We had customers who were the Fortune 500, right? At VM Logics, I was building a cloud platform, right? And while cloud is going to be hot in India eventually, when I started in 2004, it wasn't, right? And so we competed with VMware, we competed with a bunch of people, we partnered with ZenSource, we partnered with the Microsofts of the world, and all of those, right? And the Citrix finally, right? And so we were thinking global there. In fact, we were thinking US-centric. After the initial stage where I did a whole bunch of POCs here, and I realized that to truly get to the market, I had to go to the US market, where the customer was willing to pay. See, finally, you come to the realization, where can you get money? And you can get money, you have to go where the money is, finally. And I think more increasingly, the Indian consumer is affluent too, okay? So I think it's very promising for the startups in the audience, right? That they're going to start building stuff that's going to hit in a year from now, 18 months from now, 3 years from now, it's going to mature, it's going to go up that hockey stick. That's the right time to be here, right? In fact, as you see, markets are flat, where we have as much affluence in all these markets as anybody, right? With Citrix, it's totally global. I mean, we specifically make sure we don't market and build our products for any specific market, because we have offices in 80 countries. Our customers have offices in every country of the world. So how could you build for a specific geo, right? So very difficult, in that
So Joe, in your experience from a startup view, right? You're all thinking about startups, doing startups, every one of you thinking about this. And the picture that everyone paints to the investors, or even in your mind when you really believe it, which is this is a $1 billion opportunity, if not a 10 billion. And it's in India. There are 1 billion plus people. Each one of them, you take 1 rupee and that's $1 billion right there. This is the story everyone paints for investors. And yet, big companies always look at the global picture and say, no, from a market perspective, India is small, it's a global play when it comes to get money. So you starting companies in India, is it for the Indian consumer, and how do you scope this market? Do you see your company growing with Indian-specific technologies or products, or
So
would you also go global?
I'll cover the portfolio, right? And so there's about 4 or 5 companies there. So one is a Bangalore-based company, actually, Hungry Bangalore, right, which got acquired by Just Eat. It's in the food ordering in and table reservation business. The reason they got bought by Just Eat is the Indian market scenario is very different. The real issue for restaurants in India is not to do with necessarily convenience, but availability, right? So when you order from a restaurant, the chicken biryani may get over and it won't get delivered to your house because the kitchen 15% of the time runs out of the menu that you've ordered, right? And so they've figured out a different model. It's the same thing that if you look at Flipkart in terms of cash on delivery, the Indian market has got some very specific conditions which require some very specific solutions. And if you solve for those, then you have a very unique product. I look at that as Just Eat as a global model, right? So it's a global business. So Just Eat's in 76 or 37 countries, and they've now come to India, right? So they're a global business, but each market they found is a very unique solution, right? I'll flip that with another client of mine, which is in the employment space for tier 2, tier 3 cities, right? And they're building a platform that's a mousetrap to access graduates at much higher efficiency. So typically right now for a corporate, a university in a tier 2 city may give you 2 hires, right? And it's far away. And so how do you get there? And then if you want to hire 100 people, you've got to go to 50 different places, and there's no week of hiring and all that. So that's a very local solution. It's a very local issue. It could probably be regional in some of the other developing markets, but it's not a global market solution, but it's a very large solution, right? And it's a very, very big market. Employment, looking at our growth and looking at the opportunities, and as you all get your startups, you all will hire from tier 2, tier 3 cities. That's a big need. 80% of our graduates come from there, right? And so it's a big local market, right? And then there are some which are, to Mani's point, completely global. Businesses in some ways are completely, so my leisure product is a completely global business. We're building it, we've got partners in different markets. So in India, we've partnered with Book My Show, Indian Stage, Zomato, and others. In the US, we're partnering with OpenTable and partners like those. But the consumer solution is the same, right? So the consumer gets the same experience, the same offering, wherever they might be, right? And so, I can see a range of these things, and all of these are very interesting businesses.
But it varies.
But it can vary. It can vary in the portfolio.
No, very nice. You also mentioned the point about hiring, and that's often sometimes people struggle with. You say, hey, can I employ someone in Bangalore? And yes, it's going to cost a lot. Bangalore, hiring an engineer in Bangalore is really hard to get engineers because everyone's competing for the same group. Then you say, I can get an engineer in a tier 2 or a 3 city. I can go to Kochi. I can go to different cities where maybe it's cheaper to get an engineer, but maybe I won't get the same qualifications. And I may have to end up spending more in training. How do you balance that? If you were to advise a startup of where to start the startup, would it be a Bangalore, Delhi, or would it be a Pune or a Kochi? Ravi, would you take a shot at it?
That's a hard question, right? Because you have to go where the talent is, where you can attract somebody who will work with you, who's got the skills that you need, who's got the experience thing, right? It's not a question of geo specifically, right? But at the same time, as a startup, when you have such a small team, you can't have people in all 5 different cities and be figuring it out. I know there's lots of people who say, it's the age of the virtual team and all of that, but I've never seen successful teams truly execute like that, right? They tend to be people, you couldn't even do that if you were in a big office and the floor was big and you were spread out, in one cube there, one cube here. Literally, you need to come into a conference room, there needs to be whiteboards on every wall, you need to settle down with your laptops, and you need to crank, right? That's what a startup has to be in some sense, in the early stages, right? So I say, in terms of where do you go where the talent is, And how do you hire? I think, it's easy. Everybody says, oh, hire A players, right? It's like as if it's a mantra, right? And you could just hire A players, like they're just hanging around on the street corner, right? I mean, and it's not like I ever hired anybody and said, oh, you're a B player, right? But I'm hiring you anyway because I couldn't find anybody else, right? It's like, listen, you do the best you can at every time. What you have to do, in my mind, I always think about how do I raise the average of the team? What does that mean? You've got to hire better than the current people generally, right? That's very hard sometimes to do. That itself will set the bar. So if you're a founder, try and find somebody who's better than you are because the average has to go up, right? That's the first question, If that doesn't happen, you're dead. So then the third person should be better than the first two.
Yeah.
And that's how you think about it. I just think if I can just raise the average a little bit, that's great. I don't want to have the average get lower, right? That's a disaster. So that's the rule of thumb for me.
Very insightful.
Yeah.
Very insightful. Rajan, any thoughts from Intuit hiring? How do you hire people? Is it something specifically you're looking for?
Sure. I think I'll not answer from the Intuit perspective, but from a startup perspective, I successfully folded a startup, and I know thing or two of how not to do it. So I look for two things. One is when you're trying to hire for employees in a startup or really startup-like teams, you look for hunger and passion. And also, you look for the culture fit, right? So you might be working in a certain way, and the person that you're trying to bring, can he, get along with you? If he's the best programmer in the world, but he cannot get along with you, then you're headed in the direction of disaster.
Yeah.
And one thing that cannot be replaced is the hunger and the passion.
Yeah.
Right? So these culture fit, hunger and passion are two important things to look for in a person when you're trying to hire for a startup. And I think it's also got to do a lot with the environment that is created. And to that matter, I would say that there are certain pockets, like the Bangalore startup culture, Pune, now in Delhi. There is this environment that is creating this hunger and this passion for building something big, building something new, and things like that. So I'd go with areas where these environment fosters these hunger and passion, and look for people who are culturally fit with the teams.
Great point. So, Mani, how do you hire people at Orangescape? So, one of the things I'd love to hear from the panel here is, yes, we talk about passion and hunger and culture and all of these things as the top 3 parameters you're looking for when hiring. But often, when you end up at a college, you're throwing a written test, and then you're giving him coding problems. How do you really know this? And having hired people since 2003 in a startup, what are the kind of questions you throw in an interview? What are you really looking for? Is it structured at all?
No, we don't hire. For startups, you can't hire. That's my view. You have to find partners, right? So you can't hire by going to cities or colleges. You basically pull out people whom you know from your earlier company. So if you look at Orangescape was started out because Selectica decided to sell our insurance division to Accenture, and we didn't want to be in services business. So myself and Suresh came out, and Dinesh is here. Dinesh is also from Selectica, right? So all 3 came out and started this company. Accenture bought the product but didn't buy the people, so Accenture became our first client. That's how startups are created.
Very cool. Joe, do you think, how do you hire people at an incubation stage? So you're at a different stage here. At an incubation stage, how are you looking at picking people? How do you find the right people?
Yeah, so I think, I have the 3 C's for leadership, right? And I think more than the team, it actually starts with whoever's leading the company, right? Whoever's the entrepreneur kind of making things happen. I think 2 of them are to do with you, and then the third is to do with how you build out your team. I think the first is conviction, right? I think the main thing for any startup, any idea is a real strong conviction. Very often the market data will not give you results for a long time, right? If you look at Pinterest, for example, they never really got much acceptance for a long while, but the entrepreneurs, the founders were very convinced that they were onto something, right? And they kept doing it and improving the experience that they had, right? The second, which I find very, very hard for most startups, is coachability, okay? So I think while you have conviction, there are just so many things that you don't know, right? Whether it's about the business or whether it's about how important UX is, right? One of the challenges I find for many developers is we will somehow get to the UX, iteration kar lenge, we'll design, it's no, I can keep coding every evening and I'll get to the UX, right? And very often UX gives you a focus around what you're trying to sell, around the business you're trying to build. And so coachability around things you don't know about, right? And I think that's very, very critical as a young person who has conviction, wants to go after things. If you're not coachable from your investors, from the rest of the team, from people you meet, you're dead. I think the third is competence and competencies, right? And so when you kind of build out your team, you can't build out people who have the same competencies that you have, who talk the same language that you do. If you do, you're going to be very siloed. You're going to be, you're not going to actually be able to cover the compass of what's required to build out a great business, right? And so that's what you need to look for. You actually need to be able to find people who you can definitely get along with, but who might talk a different language. I mean, you don't understand half the things they're saying, but you need to trust them, and you need to feel that you can actually trust their judgment, because then the combination of y'all will make a huge difference, right?
Yeah.
And so I think that's how at least we've looked at, or I've looked at the kinds of teams I've worked with, right? And it's worked wherever those things are in place.
Awesome. And you mentioned one really important thing about UX. UX being an afterthought. When do you actually get to UX, and how do you hire a UX designer? So, Mani, let me start with you. Like, when did you realize, you're a group of very talented people from Selectica who came out, did your own company, and your enterprise. So really, why UX again? So when did that realization strike? And when it struck, how did you find the right guy?
Okay. UX is hard. I mean, it's not, you can't hire somebody and try to do UX. UX is at the heart of things, right? You have to understand it conceptually. So it has to be part of the development team. It could be the developer himself, or it could be the person who leads the development team. So what that means is this person has to realize. How you make them realize is you put a plaster in his mouth and make him sit beneath the person who is using your software, right? Because, unless you realize it, there is no way you can get that person understand what's wrong with your software. You look at the reaction of the person who is sitting behind, I mean, especially the developer, he'll say, yeah. I mean, so he'll have all sorts of expression. That's why you don't allow him to talk, right? Or else he will give some kind of cue so that the user can correct his mistakes and go forward. So the only way, I think, is to make the product guy realize it rather than hiring some UI and then make it beautiful.
Very, very rightly said. Rajan, how do you deal with UX? Is that something that's part of every little team? Or is it something that's central as a service within the company? Or in your experiences in other places, how do you handle UX?
The company goes on, so company is always bigger than people. It always happens in all businesses, people come and go. But I think the brand, the company, there are more people working, there are thousands of people working in large organizations. So it does affect, but then the brand moves on. So does that answer your question?
Okay. And one another question. When a client approaches you with a project in which many others had failed to reach the expectation of the client, will you take up that project of the client?
That's probably for you.
Yeah.
Can you repeat? I didn't get.
Yeah, when a client approaches you with a project in which he can't get a satisfied product from any others, will you accept that particular project from that client? Will you take it up as a challenge?
Definitely, because most of these online marketing initiatives are of such kind. And in my experience and analysis, we have got at least
to be part of the domain.
See, initially when I started my clinic, nobody would ask who's Dr. Shetty or look for Chisel Dental Clinic. At that time, I wanted a generic name, whereas Chisel Dental Clinic Bangalore.com. Whoever types looking for dental clinic. At this point of time, people really look out for Chisel Dental Clinic. So last year I bought that domain name of Chisel Dental Clinic.
But that is not an important factor, having it as part
No, it is important. I realized it now. It is important to have your own brand domain name. Did I make it clear?
But people will not search by chisel, right? They'll
Yes,
be-
that is what I'm telling. In the first 4 years of my business, people would not search for chisel. That's why I took as a normal name as my website address is dentalclinicbangalore.com. But now some people know about chisel and I got this domain as Chisel Dental Clinic now. So as he said, I have both the domain, Dental Clinic Bangalore and Chisel Dental. You type in anything, it redirects to the one website.
But you would suggest for somebody starting out not to start with chisel. The generic words are better. Turns out you already established chisel works also for you, isn't it?
I prefer that. To start off with generic, the
It's
regular,
always good
yeah,
because that's what this, and it's important.
Once
No,
a brand is established,
please.
is established, you like to have a domain name with your brand available. If it is available in the market, you like to buy that. So that one, your competitor should not take it. And secondly, once your brand is established, then people search for you by your brand so that you get searched with that name as well.
Sir, I have one answer to that. This was a very quite old methodology which was used, wherein which what happens is that you are a builder and you may write the popular most searched word if you are getting as a keyword, as the domain. It will help you to list on the Google properly. But today what happens, more and more business who are in the similar line are getting their website done in a proper manner and getting optimized, so that what happens, these techniques won't work no longer. So better to have your own business name. For an example, if you go and search in Google, say flats in Cochin or flats in Bangalore, it's not flatsincochin.com which comes. There are so many 10 builders which have come because they learned the business, they have optimized the website so that all these kind of domains go last in the list. So better to have your own identity to start with and use AdWords to advertise to reach the positions first and do an SEO process to gradually pull your website top in the organic listing. That will be easier.
That's a good one. Also, what's the importance of user reviews and links pointing to?
Basically, today the text reviews and testimonials, I believe that people don't trust with. So in your website, it is better if you can put video testimonials.
Does it matter whether people trust if Google thinks that it's trustworthy?
No,
it's good
basically
enough?
you are talking about the ranking of
Yes.
keywords.
So
Yeah,
having a
definitely.
lot of
because,
reviews, does it help?
So that process required lot of article posting and related things for your link building exercises. But I was mentioning about when people visit your website. As a part of, I mentioned the SEO process, all these things are covered, which are done by the content writers for you.
Okay. What about links pointing to it? Is it important to have a lot of links?
Because it's the method wherein which if you have lot of links coming to your website,
It's still
so what
important.
happens is that your natural ranking in the Google indexing will go up as per the Google rank list. So that link building is a process in SEO wherein which your website is bring to the top listing in the keywords listing. That is very important.
Thank you so much.
Welcome.
Hello, sir. Here in the balcony.
Oh, okay. There you go, right on top. Go ahead.
Yeah, right. So just related to the question that my other friend was asking there. Recently, like more focus has been on getting more websites, Indianized websites online, more Indian business online. But then there is other area that's emerging, that is SEO. People want to be in the first or the second page of Google results for most of the keywords. So one thing that I recently observed was there are many black hat SEOs that are going on. As in illegally get some backlinks and just get in the top first or second pages in Google. So is this a right trend that is going with more and more people coming into more and more people wanting to get their business online? Even this trend is emerging. How can we tackle that, and are we going in the right direction for this?
Yes, basically what happens, Google, or maybe I'm referring Google because Google, you might be knowing that they have started with something called Google Panda last year, and this year it is with Google Penguins. So these initiatives from these search engines are to arrest these kind of websites, and today being in this industry for quite some time, I have seen that all these people do these short time techniques are not getting the result on a long time basis. But there are certain limitations. When people or business, you should also understand that search engine optimization is a process which takes time. Many of the businesses, when the service provider goes to him and say that it takes 10 or 12 months to take your website on top, generally the businessman doesn't ready to wait for that. Right. So this is a very big concern that any business should understand organic listing is a time taking process. And moreover, coming to that, today all competing commercial keywords, first 3 positions are being filled with the AdWords links, sponsored links. Yeah. So if you are doing an SEO process also, be clear, you have to come in the first 3 or 4 to get enough traffic. If you are not in the first 3 or 4, better you be in the 15th page.
Sir, that's totally valid, saying that first 3 are ad links, adverts or other sponsored links. But then also there is a trend that people try to ignore that and then go on starting looking at the other links generally, because they know that it's paid and that's why they are there.
No, but basically it's not on whether they are paid or something. It's the relevancy that matters. When I Google something for something, what I see, I go and read. So how you written an ad copy in your Google AdWords ads, if that matters very close to his need, he will definitely click that. Yeah. And when he click that, where he goes? When he goes there, whether he see an information which is relevant to his search needs, if not, there is an intimate button called back. Click back, go back, see the next one, right?
Yes.
People are used to use that.
Thank you.
Hello.
Srijit,
Hello,
one
sir.
last question. Thank you.
Sorry, hello, sir. This is Harsh from IBS Business School. Talking about SMEs in India, can you comment on the profit margin and sustainable growth of companies, SMEs? Because what happens is whenever one medium-sized company, say, goes online, so all following it, all the small industry also come online. So in coming years, definitely people have more choices to what to choose from, and the market share of the first company which enters reduces. So what can you comment on the sustainability growth and profit margin of the companies which goes online, and especially those companies which have similar kind of, 1 or 2 types of services product which provide. For example, dental is one kind of product which your company gives. Maybe hair, for that reason, hair providing one kind of service when they don't have diversified businesses.
Yeah.
Well, it's very difficult to comment on a specific business, but in general, what I've seen is people keep various kinds of budgets. And what we suggest to people, you invest your money and then see the returns. Based on your returns, you always decide what is good for you. That is what most SMEs does. When we reach out to an SME always say, I have got specific budget, I'm expecting this much of going to my turnover. Out of this much, I feel I should be spending on promotions. That promotion may include online promotion, that promotion may include some participating trade fairs, etc., etc. And when they do that over a period of time, maybe in 2 months, 3 months, when they do few of their activities, they understand what is working for them. Based on that, they stay put with the activity which is working for them, and what is not working, they kind of, leave it.
Add on to that is like the support, for an example, you are asking that one business is advertising online. First, lot of other business comes to the similar category, yes, but the CE is also increasing. If you look at, generally for an example, is the question of shoes. There was at times there are less than 20,000 searches about shoes online in past 3-4 years back. Today, there are 60 lakh searches only for shoes in India. So the CE is getting more, and no company, no business can eat the entire share. So everybody has got an opportunity. So you can take your bucket from this large sea, because online is growing so
one more lead question, for example, talking about e-commerce sites. Now, what has happened is previously when they come in, they get a lot of, they're popular and they do good business. But recently we have found, I just researched on it, that they're finding it challenging to raise funds from the market. They're getting into different businesses, for that they need funds. But the confidence of the investors in e-commerce sites today is reducing. So
I do definitely go. I don't buy your point specifically, because I will tell you an example. January 2012, one of you guys come to me, say that they have a fashion portal, apparel portal, they want to advertise. So initially my BDM, maybe sit with them, we worked out and said, minimum you can start with investing of 25,000 rupees. Then he said 25,000 rupees is quite big amount of money, which we cannot do now. So he said that you come back and arrange, because you are going to annotate a portal. 3-4 months down the line, he called up and told, I want to meet in Cafe Coffee Day in Forum Mall. Then I said, why we should come there? We come there and he has 2-3 partners. He started selling me that I want to sell the nick of the fashion apparel. I want to advertise in UK, USA and all. What has happened is that he got an offer of VC funding of 1.5 crore. Now he want to give a marketing plan which is worth of at least 45 to 50 lakhs to them in order to convince. So it is not the question today. Last year you might have seen the reports coming in the media saying that the largest VC fundings were got for the .com portals. So I don't see that it's the funding or other issue. Like any business you want to start, you need to have basic fundings and things ready. But definitely e-commerce is something growing pretty fast. And I said that your service levels, what you are giving, customers are very choosy, very selective nowadays.
yes, of course.
Once what experience they get buying from your site makes your growth. If the customers are happy, naturally you will get business.
Okay, thank you, sir.
All right then. I think we
excuse
completely
me.
run out of time. I'm sorry.
Excuse
we'll have-
me, I have been waiting for almost the last 15 minutes here.
Where are you?
standing here.
Can't see you.
Uh,
Okay, we'll
sorry,
take
Karthik.
one last question, a quick question. And this is the last
Probably
question, guys.
quick question, and I also needed to share a couple of points because I have a different view about Black Hat and the point that Srijit said. Do I have the liberty to add it?
Yeah, go ahead.
Definitely.
One thing that I felt, the way it's getting projected, SEO is not working or it is too tough to work. Because this is again my personal opinion about the way it's been reflected. It's not so. Even yesterday's WordStream study says, yes, definitely Google first crawl is giving a lot of importance to Google AdWords. The space has been reduced, but then it is 67 to 33. That's the so natural search engine rankings also do give business. It's not that search engine optimization does not work, because Google, if you don't start supporting SEO, then I think it's a bad scenario, because from the morning I've been seeing it's more like AdWords. So, because I do digital marketing on a complete sphere, so this I wanted to add it on a personal note. Second thing, Black Hat has been there for almost, say, ever since Alta Vista was there. It's been there and it will be there. And as Srijit said, yes, it will continue to get addressed. That's why Google has been successful. Because Google continues to keep changing its algorithm, or keep making people guess about its algorithms, what it changes, what it will change, or what can, whether it is social media links that would give its score, whether Google Plus. And so again, on the linking part, it's been proven that G Plus works a lot better than backlinks, because one gentleman was asking about links. So link is actually falling in terms of relevancy. So start G Plus, because G Plus has been also promoted here in terms of business. I think this is again for Google, okay? Then maybe I think the student who asked it, I think he was referring to, maybe I'm not sure whether I should take the name. It's Flipkart that he was referring to, because Flipkart is running bad. I think he's referring to the $150 million funding they are seeking right now. And so it's to answer it the other way, see, all businesses have their challenges, and VC funding is happening. And e-commerce as a field is very challenging. It's like something that is easily replicable, and is also something where, because take 15 years back when Mr. Karthik was pointing out, when we went to say we need you businesses to have a .com site, it was too tough to convince them. But then over 5 years it changed, so acceptance has grown. But then today, if you, in 2000 to 2005, when we went and told them, hey, you need to do internet marketing, it was tough. That has changed from 2005. And so it's like e-commerce, some big players that existed, they are no more like considered big. And VC is helping them out for some of the newcomers. And if they have a very strong plan and proof of concept, which is all visible, just not Flipkart, even Zoe is doing good, Jabang is doing good, and then Myntra is there. You have Make My Trip, and I have my favorite Red Bus in Bangalore. A lot of names are doing good. So as people's need move towards internet, definitely they need it. And I don't think there's a scarcity. And he was also pointing out the demand of, or the inventory for Google, right? Keywords, those keep increasing, and it's a clear thing. Finally, one question. Sorry. The question is not yet started. See, this is not a question either. Let's take a case from the mobile industry when people couldn't afford mobile, right? Because Karthik was asking this question: why is that SMEs are not adapting or buying a domain? Or so yes, it's a great initiative from Google for the Google India Online. I am personally clapping it. And can't there be some more, say, ways to create the awareness? Because I believe one name, again, Big Rock did it by saying 99 rupees domain or something. Maybe I haven't tried and tested it, but can Google do something in a big scale to create that awareness? Because Google has the width, breadth, and the cache, everything it can do. Can Google do it? We are all behind you, Google.
Of course.
See, I eat, so, drink Google.
So very quickly, I think I'll just take about half a minute to answer that question.
Because then I can ask you one more favor, because you can also give domains to all the students.
Yeah, sure. So
thanks.
Sure, and thanks for this comment and the question, and I'll quickly answer the question. So Google definitely sees a lot of potential in India. I think India is a key market, key growing market for Google. One of the key things is get India business online, and we already have about 150,000 businesses who have taken it. We expect this to go to 500,000. That itself is a huge initiative. We are doing a lot of education, seminars, conferences like these. There's a lot of money which Google is spending. So yes, we are doing it and we'll continue to do it to drive businesses take the online route. I think with that, if you have any more questions, we can take it offline. No, we will have to stop here. I'm sorry.
Actually, I just posed the question here because this is a good forum from the Google, but I'm not expecting the answer because more or less the answer is there. It is as the theme of the day goes, like go India, go online, make business, make money, things like that, right? So if you see mobile Android industry, people developing Android apps in India cannot sell it. So any thoughts about it?
Yeah, I'll give you my thoughts after this because there are a lot of people who are waiting. So thank you for the question. But no, it's a relevant question. It's a relevant question. I appreciate it. No, it's a relevant question. We can discuss it. There's no problem. Thank you to the panelists for taking time out and coming here. Big hand of applause to these guys. They've come all the way from outside of Bangalore. So thank you very much. Thank you, Dr. Shetty, and I hope your business keeps growing. Okay? Thank you. Thank you, guys.